Hi there, welcome to the Brown Lounge. I'm Holly Brown, and today I'm bringing to you Ben & Jerry's ice cream cakes. Now, I don't know if you've ever had a Ben & Jerry's ice cream cake, but first of all, they're fabulous because what's not to like? It's Ben & Jerry's ice cream through and through. But what's unique about a Ben & Jerry's ice cream cake is that there's actually no cake in the middle. A Ben & Jerry's ice cream cake uses ingredients in the middle that are typically found in a Ben & Jerry's scoop shop. Things like chocolate chip cookies or homemade brownies. So all you have to do is pick your flavors. What are you going to make with your ice cream? Whether you're going to choose chocolate chip cookies or brownies. And then you need to make sure you have the right pan. Now there's a couple of options, a couple of choices. This one is the easiest. A springform pan is great because you can just layer your ice cream and your cake layers, and you just spring it open when it's frozen and solid. So that's pretty easy. If you don't have a springform pan at home though, and what you have instead is just a classic cake tin, I'm going to show you actually how you can make your layers in your cake tin and then release the ice cream cake under hot water very quickly, and it just comes right out. So you don't have to go and invest in a springform pan if you don't want to. We can make one in a classic cake pan here. But what you do need to do is you need to decide what ice cream flavors you're going to use. I'm going to use my husband's favorite, which is fish food. I'm going to use my favorite, which is vanilla Heath Bar Crunch. You need 2 pints of each flavor. And then you have to choose, are you going to go with your cookies as your layer or your brownies as your cake layer? Or one of each, because you're going to need 2 layers. As I said, there's really no cake in a Ben & Jerry's ice cream cake, but it does have layers. So what I like to do is I like to either go with chocolate chip cookies, and I make my own homemade chocolate chip cookies. You can get our recipe on thebrownlounge.com. And you can also use your own homemade brownies. You can make them from scratch. You can make them from a mix, whatever you really like. It's really up to you. Now, there's a couple of other things that you can do if you don't want to make something from scratch as well. I've in fact made Oreo cookie crumbs as a crust before. I've used ginger snaps as a crust. You can even use chocolate wafer cookies. So if you do use a boxed cookie like an Oreo or a wafer, what you want to do is you want to crush it up really finely, put about 1/4 cup of sugar and about 1/2 cup of melted butter, and just mix it up. And just let that be sort of a crumble kind of cookie layering. But if you're using your springform pan, you want to start with either your cookies or your brownies as your bottom layer. So once you completely cover the pan on the bottom with your cookies, then you're going to put your ice cream on top. So once it is softened nicely, you want to pour it out. And I would pour it out sort of in bits like this, because then you're going to want to spread it over your cookies, just like that. So you want to get 2 pints out of the container, and then just let it sit for a minute, and then use your spatula to smooth it. Because what you want to do is you want to make sure that each layer is flat before you create the next layer. So I'm just going to let that sit for a minute until I start smoothing it. And let me just show you for a second what we're going to do if we're not using the springform pan and instead we're using the cake pan. Now I already put a layer of ice cream. 2 pints of ice cream went into this cake pan, and I'm actually going to use brownies on this one just so I can show you the difference and how it works. So brownies are actually really easy because they're so pliable. You just form them around the edges of the pan and then work into the center. And the other nice thing about brownies is they crumble a little bit easier, so you can fill in any gaps just by tearing the brownie apart and kind of filling in the gaps on the side. So once you do your first 2 layers, your ice cream and your cake, or brownie or cookie, as it were, then you freeze it. And you want to freeze it until it's hard enough to press down on it firmly as you put in a second layer of ice cream. So that usually takes about 20 minutes to a half an hour. And so I'll finish doing these. And in fact, let me just show you real quickly back here. you want to make sure that when you smooth your ice cream, it's nice and flat on top. And that's going to take a little bit of elbow grease for you to do it. And it's going to take your ice cream a little time to just melt and get softened all the way so that you can just sort of flatten it out over those cookies and get it even. And you just kind of go like this, just out to the edges, pushing the ice cream back and forth. And then once all that's done, freeze it, and you're ready for the next layer. Okay, this is the last layer on our cake. So we've got the first layer was fish food. I'm sorry, the first layer was chocolate chip cookies, and then we did a layer of fish food, 2 pints. Then we did another layer of chocolate chip cookies, and the last layer of ice cream is the vanilla Heath Bar Crunch on top. And as you can see, when I'm pushing down on the ice cream, the layers below are frozen stiff, so they're staying put. And that's the whole purpose of making sure that each layer is frozen solid before adding the next layer. And that's really important. We're going to whip up the whipping cream, and then we're going to frost the ice cream cake. So I've got a couple of cups of heavy whipping cream here that I'm just going to pour into my blender, or you can use a hand mixer as well. And then I'm going to just add a little powdered sugar as I go. About 2 tablespoons. Now what you can see when you look right down at the blenders, you can start to see that the cream begins to follow itself as it goes around. So you can see, I mean, it's just not falling off the beater here, and it's going to be nice and stiff when you pull it up. It's really like frosting. It has the consistency of frosting even though it's cream. Let it sit for a couple minutes and just warm up ever so slightly. It'll just be a little bit more pliable. But the nice thing about ice cream is that you can always sort of fuss with it and get it back to the way you want it to be. Like you can see, my cake is cracking a little bit right where the springform pan is opening. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my offset spatula in a moment to sort of push it back together and get it the way I want it to be. So I've loosened it up, but now I'm going to have to jiggle it a little bit to release it on the sides. Just be patient. Like I said, the more it gets a chance to kind of warm up slightly and separate itself from the cold metal, it'll just be easier to pull up. Okay, there it comes. Gently. Just jiggle it. Just jiggle it. And isn't that pretty? You can see that little crack right there? But all I need to do is just take my offset spatula and just push it back together again. And if you want to put it back in the freezer for a couple minutes, you can do that just to make sure that it's just perfectly back together, just the way you want it. And I like to give it one more, just little smush before I put the frosting on it. Then you just get your whipped cream right on the top, just like that, like a big pile. And then again, using your offset spatula, you just push it around on top of the cake. Isn't that pretty? It just looks like beautiful white buttercream frosting. And then you just push it around the sides. And there's lots of things you can do to decorate the cake. You can drizzle fudge on it. You can drizzle caramel on it if you like. If you made cookies, you can crumble some cookies and just sprinkle them on the top. If you used brownies, you could do the same thing with the brownies. Just use your imagination. The one thing you want to make sure, especially when you're working with dark ice creams, that you don't push too hard into the ice cream with the whipped cream, because You want the whipped cream to stay nice and white. You don't want to get it mixed up with the chocolate. There you go. And if you want to be super clean, just take a napkin or a paper towel and just wipe around the edges so that you have a clean edge. And that's it. Then put it in the freezer. Freeze it one more time, and then before you serve it, let it sit out for about 5 to 10 minutes. Because when you cut into the ice cream cake, you want to have like a nice cut. You don't want to have to. So here's our other cake. This is the cake that we made with some Haagen-Dazs ice cream. We made this one with brownies, as I said, our Mexican chipotle brownies. And we made it in this, just a classic cake pan. So the question is, how do you get an ice cream cake, a frozen ice cream cake, out of a pan like this? Well, what you do is you put it under hot water, but upside down. So what we're gonna do, and this is what I learned to do when I was a Ben & Jerry's franchisee at the Scoop Shops. You put it under very hot water, like really hot water, really hot. And then you turn the cake over, holding your hands here so that you don't let the cake fall. You put it under the hot water and you just let it jiggle like that until you can feel the cake releasing from the pan. Careful because it is hot water, and amazingly, the cake doesn't get so wet. Oh, there it goes. Okay, whoop. I can feel it. Now watch this. It just falls out. It does drip a little bit. That's okay. We're going to put it straight into the freezer to set. These little dribbles will be just fine. I'm going to just wipe them up with a paper towel. Isn't that beautiful? Okay, we're going to put it in the freezer, and then we can frost that one just the same way we did the other one, or we can top it with caramel or fudge or whatever you like. Give it a pretty caramel swirl, just like that. And then when that goes in the freezer, it'll set up beautifully. And we will be done. So enjoy your ice cream cake, whether you make a Ben & Jerry's cake or a Haagen-Dazs cake. You can even try this with sorbet. I actually have a sorbet cake recipe on the Brown Lounge as well, so you can check that one out. Enjoy, it makes a great summer treat. And just make sure you don't let it melt too much when you're out in the sun. See you next time on the Brown Lounge.